Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to begin with lecture 7, and I'm going to start with the second part of The Rime of Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. In the previous lecture I looked at the part 1 with you, and I went over very slowly because it was just the beginning of the poem, and I wanted you to understand how Coleridge blends in natural and the supernatural elements in his poem. So before we begin with this second part today, I'm going to give you a brief recap of the first part. Now, in the first part, if you recall, Coleridge had introduced to you the characters, and they included the ancient mariner himself, his crew members, but then there were also a wedding guest, because if you remember the story, he starts from outside a wedding ceremony. The wedding's going on, there are guests arriving, and the ancient mariner is sitting right at the gate, right outside the place where the wedding is taking place. And he chooses one of the guests. He doesn't stop everybody. This is important. He selects people, because Coleridge is going to emphasize the same fact to you towards the end of the poem. So he selects a person, and this particular wedding guest that he stops, although the guest is scared of him, he's scared of the way the ancient mariner looks, the way that he's dressed up, the ancient look about him, and the way he addresses him, all of it scares him. And he tries to shun him away, but he cannot. And I explained to you how it is through his eyes, through the glittering eyes that Coleridge keeps on mentioning to you. Those glittering eyes of the ancient mariner, they are able to keep him spellbound. And he's forced to listen to his story. So the ancient mariner actually is telling his own strange tale. And so he is the teller. So that is why the story is, I told you, is written in a conversational manner. It is told as if a story is told, and that is why it moves rather quickly, and it moves rather interestingly. So it's a horror, gothic tale in which there are supernatural elements, where there are natural and the supernatural both are combined. In fact, in most of our fairy tales, in stories in our own culture, I'm sure you've heard of so many stories from your own parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or you must have read them in the books. There are, we have the natural and the supernatural worlds both in the horror stories. So sometimes, someone has gone somewhere, comes across some spirits, and so this is how the two tales, the two elements are mixed. The same is what Coleridge is trying to do for us here. So the story is about the mariner. The Marines, they are people who travel on the ship. They are sailors, basically. So it's a story about the sailors, and you must remember that sailors are superstitious people. They are very superstitious because they spend most of their time out on the seas, out on the oceans. They are closer more to nature than to man. They are closer more to this natural as well as the supernatural phenomena than they are to the normal life pattern. So they are rather superstitious people. They have more to do with strange things, and there are myths that they believe in, and strange kinds of myths. And they may experience strange things also in their journeys, and that is how they create these myths. There are so many movies that are made on the similar pattern. Pirates of the Caribbean, if you've seen it, it's a similar kind of a story where the supernatural and the natural, both the worlds are combined. It's a story of how natural, normal people like us find supernatural people, people who were dead long ago, and who were wandering in their ships that had been destroyed and that had drowned in the oceans long time ago. But those ships and their souls are still wandering out in the ocean, and sometimes normal human beings do come across them. So in the movie also you see how both the worlds are brought together, how both the worlds act together to resolve a certain mystery, to bring about a solution to certain problem. So it's a similar kind of a story that Coleridge is telling us here. But it is his power of telling, that beautiful power of telling and retelling the story that grips us basically. So he goes on. He tells you that they were going merrily towards a destination. But what happens when they reach the equator? And I told you the equator is the liminal space. It is that space where changes occur in the plot, as you shall see, especially in the Ancient Mariner. So when they reach the equator, the sun is right above their heads, right above the ship, and they are hit with a storm. And the storm is described as a large wind, and then is like an enemy. Two metaphors are used, and it pushes them, forces them southward, and they eventually land into the world of ice. They reach the land of ice, where there's nothing but ice, and their eyes are sored. Their eyes hurt when they look at only one scene and one color around them, and they feel that they have they were being punished for something. Remember, they were supernatural creatures. They were superstitious people. So what happens then? Then they come across a bird. They don't come across a bird flies towards them. The bird comes to them. Birds come, and it is like a bird of mercy. It's like a bird of blessing. It's something that is God sent. But as I explained in the last class, it's not just a natural phenomenon. It's also supernatural, because the way it appears, there was nothing, no life there, but all of a sudden this single bird appears, and as it appears, ice cracks, and the ship that was stuck in the ice water, it now is able to move. So natural, supernatural worlds, both are not shown as two separate entities. They are shown as one. So harming one means harming the other also. So if you harm the natural world, you harm the supernatural world also. Similarly, if the natural world is blessing you, it's not the natural world alone. The blessing is also from the supernatural world. So they are one. They're not separate. They are not two separate entities. This is how Coleridge has wants us to look at nature. Nature not as Wordsworth saw it, but nature as also encompassing the supernatural, the world of the spirits, the world of the dead ones, the world of strange phenomena. So it is for him, that's also part of the natural world. It is not supernatural, but it is also for him part of the natural phenomena. So that part ended with the killing of the bird. The bird was killed without any reason. Without any reason. This is important. The mariner commits a crime. He commits a sin against the natural world, against the supernatural world. He kills a bird without any reason. And he killed a bird that had been sent to them by God, as he says, and which they had hailed in the name of God. So they broke that pledge that they had made with God, with nature, with the spirit in the natural world. So he broke that pledge, he broke that vow, and the bird was killed. Now we begin with the second part today, and you shall see how everything begins to change now. Remember, the story I told you in the very beginning is about the sin being committed, and then how the mariner is eventually redeemed, how he is forgiven. But before he is forgiven, he goes through a process of punishment. So these middle parts, part 2, 3, 4, you will see in these parts the punishment as it is brought about by the natural as well as the supernatural world, that is described to you. So in this part also we will see how both the worlds conspire to punish the mariner as well as the other sailors for being part of this crime. So up till part 1, a crime was committed, but everything had gone smoothly after they had left the land of ice, and now they're moving northward. A soft wind is blowing behind them and it is moving the ship onwards, so they are happy. They are now happy. So let me begin with part 2. Part 2. The sun now rose up upon the right. Out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, and on the left went down into the sea. Again, Coleridge uses the same method. He does not tell you the direction. He doesn't say that they're going towards north. He simply tells you through the movement of the sun. So the sun is now rising on the right, and it is setting on the left. So it is the other way around now. So they are now moving towards the north. But there's another significant things that he tells you. That they are still hid in mist. They have not gone far away from the land of ice as yet, so the mist is still around them, and the sun's light is coming to them through mist. The weather has not cleared away. And the good south wind still blew behind, but no sweet bird did follow, nor any day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. So these echo the same words that mariner used in the first part, where he tells us how the bird used to visit the ship for food and to play with them. So he says, but everything's going fine. The good south wind still blew behind, and the only thing missing was that there was no sweet bird. We see that there is some kind of guilt that the mariner feels, because Coleridge tells us, and I had done a hellish thing, and it would work them woe. For all a word, I had killed the bird that made the bees to brood. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. In these lines, Coleridge tells us that the other sailors blamed initially, so we see that these sailors are blaming the mariner for killing the bird, because remember, they saw it as a sign of good omen. It was a good omen for them. It was a blessing for them. So they are blaming him, they're accusing him for killing something that was their friend, for killing something that had brought them good, that had taken away their troubles. So they are blaming him, and the mariner himself says that he had done a hellish thing, a thing. He had committed a sin that can lead you to the hell. So it is comparable to a great sin which can take us to hell. So it's not a small act that he thinks that he's committed, but for a sailor in their world, killing something that is part of the natural world is equal to a sin. So you have to see it, understand it from their mindset, how they view these things. Not like us. Killing a bird for us may be a normal thing, but not for them, because they live out in the ocean, they live among nature. For them, every object of nature is precious. Nature respects them, they respect nature, because they know that their only friend out there is nature. So this is their mindset, basically. So they all agree that what he'd done was really bad. It was hellish. For all a word means they had all agreed that I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Because with the bird came the breeze, and the ship was able to move out of the land of ice and to take them northward. Slay, I am sure you know what the word means. It means to kill. Nor dim nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. Then all a word I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. It was right, said they, such birds to slay that bring the fog and mist. So you see what is happening? See how superstitious they are. What is actually happening is that the ship is moving away from the land of mist. It is going towards north. It is moving towards equator. It is close to the equator, the center of the earth now, and the weather begins to change. The mist and the fog begins to fade, and the sunlight becomes clearer and clearer, because he says nor dim nor red. The sun is now neither very dim, because it is not coming through the mist. It is not very red nor very harsh. He says, but it is as big as God's own head, the glorious sun uprest. So they could now see the glorious sun. So they were happy. They had seen sunlight after a long time, direct sunlight, and so they were happy. They were relieved. And they all a word. Still he says, repeats a word. They had all agreed that he had killed the bird which had brought the fog and mist. So a change in the opinion of the sailors occurs. They say what this mariner had done was the right thing. They say it was right. It was right that the mariner killed that bird, because it was because of that bird that they were still shrouded in mist and fog. So this is where the superstitions come in now, because they don't realize that because they have traveled away from the south, that the fog and mist have disappeared and the sun is shining clearly above their heads, but they blame it now on the bird. So because the bird is now dead, it is killed, the fog has gone, because the bird had appeared to them in the land of mist and snow. It was a bird of land and mist, and snow. So as long as it would have remained with them, they would have been shrouded with mist and fog. But because the bird is now dead, the sky is clear, the sun is shining brightly. The fair breeze blew and the white foam flew. The furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into that silent sea. So everything's fine even up till now. The nature is peaceful. The breeze is fair. It's not stormy. The pleasant, beautiful breeze blew. The white foam flew. White foam meaning he's talking about the tips of the waves, which are foamy, whitish. The furrow, the waves followed free. So the movement of the water is friendly, the breeze is friendly, but then he says, we were the first one that burst into the silent sea. And now they come upon a place where everything is silent. No waves, the sea is totally silent. And this is a turning point. Again, they've reached the equator, they've reached the liminal space, and you will see that the changes in plot will occur. But from here onwards, it's also significant, because you will see how the natural and the supernatural world start to take their revenge from these. Because first it was only the mariner who had committed a sin, the others were free of guilt. But now, because they had all agreed that he had done the right thing, they have become an accomplice into the crime. They are partners into his crime. So they have become part of him, so they will also be punished. So it will be a collective punishment. So it begins now. The change in nature begins to take place. Coleridge tells us, down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down, it was bad as sad could be, it was sad as sad could be, and we did speak only to break the silence of the sea. Again he repeats the line, the silence of the sea. Remember, the silence, for the sailors, the silence is very bothersome. It can almost kill them, in fact. The silence can even for us normal individuals, the silence can be killing. Even when they were in the land of mist and so, remember, it was a silence that had overpowered them, because there was no sign of life, no sound of water, no sound of wind, nothing. Even they stopped talking out of fear. So it was silence all around, and in that silence he tells you that they could hear the ice. The only sound was that of the ice cracking, and sometimes the cracking of the ice appeared to them as if it was a growling. So they were imagining things, hallucinating, as if, you know, the cracking was like the growling of some animal, because this was what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear and see some sign of life. So silence is crippling, it is destructive for them. So here again, it is the silence of the sea that is the first, you can say, the first punishment upon them, or the first revenge upon them. He says, but now the picture is sad as sad could be. So it is very sad. The breeze has dropped. The sails, I told you the sails are attached to the mast. Because there is no breeze, naturally, the sails were not required to direct the ship in a certain direction. And he says the only voice that could be heard was our own voices. So we spoke only to break the silence. All in a hot and copper sky, the bloody sun at noon, right up above the mast, did stand, no bigger than the moon. And what else? He says, now the sky becomes hot and copper. Hot, but he also says copper. It turns copper color. The sky turns copper in color. It is a mixture of orange and yellow and red, in fact, like copper. So it becomes hot. It is difficult to look towards the sky. And the sun is bloody. It is bloody red. So this is a revenge of, you see, the natural world. The natural world starts to take its revenge. The breeze drops first. The sea becomes silent. Then the sky turns copper. The sun becomes bloody. And it stays, he says, above the mast all day, no bigger than the moon. So nature turns cruel. Day after day, we stuck, no breath, no motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. He says, they don't remember how many days passed, but their punishment prolonged. It was not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, but he says day after day, countless, they don't know, but it was as if it was not never ending. They stayed in that position for they don't know how many days. They were stuck in the ocean. They were stuck in that one place. The ship did not move. The sea was silent. The breeze was nowhere. The sun was cruel. You see, the sky was cruel. So he says, no breath, no motion, as idle. This is a beautiful image that he creates for you. As idle, the simile that he creates for you also, that the ship was like as idle, as motionless. Idle here means motionless as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. So anybody looking at the scene would see it as a painting in which there is a ship which is painted because it is not moving. Nothing is moving. The sails are not blowing. Nobody is moving in the ship. So it is a motionless ship. And from here onwards, in the next few lines, you will see a new theme will be introduced, and this is the theme of imprisonment. The theme of revenge, the theme of sin and redemption, both those themes are continuing, but another is now introduced, and this is a theme of imprisonment, because you see this ship is imprisoned here. The ship is in this prison, in the prison which is this natural world. The natural world is a prison, and the ship is imprisoned there. So this is one concept. And secondly, we see that these sailors are also imprisoned in their ship. They cannot go out. They cannot leave their ship. They cannot go anywhere. They are prisoners in their own ship. And the ship is a prisoner in the whole of the natural world. So such is the theme of imprisonment. And they are all like prisoners in the prison, what do they do? They are made to suffer. They are made to suffer for their wickedness. In the same way, these sailors are made to suffer. They are made to undergo punishment for their cruelty, for their wickedness against nature, against the spiritual world. And the spiritual world encompasses both the natural and the supernatural world. And then another irony. What is the irony? Irony, I'm sure you understand what the word irony means. Irony is a double meaning. When the apparent meaning is different from the intended meaning. So he says, water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink, water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. So what the irony is that there is water all around their ship. The ship is stuck in the ocean, remember. But ocean water, you know, is not drinkable. It is salty water. And it cannot be drunk. So, but since they are stuck, the ship is stuck for a long time now in that one place with a hot sun right above their heads. All the water, drinking water that they had in their ship with them, that is maybe finished. And he says there is such a lack of water that, and because of the heat, he says even the boards of the ship begin to shrink. The wood, you know, when it loses its moisture, it begins to shrink. And when it gains moisture, you know, it begins to swell. Like in the monsoon seasons here. In the monsoon season, you must have noticed that the doors, certain kind of wood, the doors, you know, they swell because they absorb moisture, so they swell. They're difficult to close. So he says the effect of this dry, hot weather was that even the boards, the planks of the ship, they begin to shrink. And he repeats it, water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. So they are now very thirsty. The next punishment that is given to them is that they are almost dying of thirst. Then the punishment doesn't stop here. Coleridge tells you the very deep did rot. And because the water around them, around their ship, is still, it is not moving. So, and you know that a stagnant water, the water that does not move, it begins to rot. Rot ho jata. It starts rotting. It starts becoming smelly. It starts to give out bad smell. It develops algae, and that green, slimy, you know, kind of things in water are grown, which make it give out bad smell. So he says, "Oh Christ." Now in this crisis-like situation, naturally they're all Christians. They remember their God. They remember Christ. He says, "Oh Christ, that ever this should be." You see, so they see their death near. They see that they will die if nothing soon comes to their help. So he says that ever this should be. So they are actually feeling guilty that they did something that resulted in this punishment for them. Yeah, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. So what happens? If you remember in the first part, when the nature was cruel, they were in the land of ice. Nature was cruel, but not so cruel. It also sent help in the form of the bird. That bird came and they were released of that trouble, of their troubles. But what is happening now? They are once again troubled. They are once again being punished by the natural world. But this time, no albatross comes to their help. Instead of the albatross, what do they see? They see living creatures, but they are not pleasant like the albatross. They are slimy creatures. Slimy, he says, ugly, slimy creatures, things in fact he says, he doesn't even call them creatures, he says slimy things, we don't know what they were, which crawled with legs. So they were not even insects, they were insects. They were insects because they had legs also. They were slimy like insects that have no legs, that float or glide like snakes. But these were strange kinds of slimy things. These were strange kinds of snakes because they also had legs. They crawl with legs upon the slimy sea, and they crawl upon the surface of the sea. So the water around the ship begins to rot now. It begins to give off bad smell. But that's not all. They see strange objects, strange things crawling about on the surface of the ocean. About, in reel and rout, the death fires danced at night, the water like a witch's oil, burned green and blue and white. And that's not all again. At night, what do they see? The death fires. So at night they saw strange nights, strange lights. They would see strange lights. You can call it their hallucinations. You can say that they were hallucinating because they were so thirsty. Their minds, or body must have also become dehydrated. It must have shrunk. So they were actually feeling dehydrated, maybe under the effect of that lack of water due to the extreme thirst they felt, or they saw these creatures, they saw these abnormal things around them. It could be anything, because we now know that hallucinations and this paranormal activity that sometimes we see, that is all created by our minds. We know it now, but Coleridge back then, maybe he was aware of it, but he is trying to make it appear as if this is a supernatural world that is also taking its revenge from these sailors. So he says at night they see strange lights dancing on the surface of the ocean. The water, he says, had become like a witch's oil. The water also burned. The water also was not friendly. It was not nice. It was not good. It burnt. And it burnt, you see, in strange colors, green, blue, and white. So all night on the surface of the water danced strange lights of green, blue, and white color. Maybe these lights were coming out of, emanating from the bodies of these slimy creatures. Because, you know, we know that there are some kinds of fish, some kinds of insects that give out light at night. So maybe these were those objects that were giving out light at night, and or maybe the sailors were hallucinating. But whatever the case may be, this was one form of punishment that was being meted out to them. And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. Now again, that their superstitiousness, now they believe that maybe a spirit, there was a spirit which had followed them from, he says that a spirit had followed them from the land of mist and fog. And it was that spirit that was causing them all this trouble. This was also one of the belief which was shared by these sailors. And they say, Coleridge tells us that 9 fathom deep he had follows us. Fathom is a measuring scale that is used for water. So he says the spirit lived in the depths of water, but it had followed them from the land of mist and snow, 9 fathom deep, and it was bothering them. It was causing this punishment, taking its revenge from them, because they had been able to escape from that world. And every tongue, through utter drought, was withered at the root. We could not speak, no more than if we than if we had been choked with soot. Such is their calamity. You see, he says, we were all so thirsty, we were all so very thirsty and half dead. Our tongue was attached to the roof of the mouth. It was withered, he says, to the root. It had become dry, the tongue had become dry. We could not speak. So the tongue had become so dry that he says, our mouths were so dry, our throat was so dry, our body was so dry, we couldn't move, but we couldn't speak also. And then he compares it to choking with soot. Soot is rak, you know. So it is a burnt charcoal. So he says it is as if somebody had put the burnt charcoal or the soot, the dust, the dry charcoal into our mouth, and stuffed our throat with soot, and because of which we couldn't speak. But it is actually, so he's just giving you an idea how bad they were feeling. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. Although they were all very tired, although they couldn't move a lot, but they did one thing, the sailors. The sailors did one thing. And what is it that they do? The mariner remembers that day very well, because remember, he's telling the story to the wedding guest, and he's telling the story, he's narrating the story. See how he tells us, uses what words he uses to describe it. He says, ah, well a day. So he says, I still remember that day when, what evil looks had I from old and young. He says, all those people on the ship, all the people who were on board, they were looking at me with evil eyes, because they all understood now that this was the punishment. This punishment was a result of his sin. And what do? Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. The cross, you know, is a symbol of, their symbol of Christianity. It is a symbol of, sign of blessing, sign of mercy, a sign of Christian soul, pure soul. It is an aid, it is help, it is protection against all that is evil and demonic. So that protection is taken away from the mariner now. He does no longer wears the cross around his neck, but he wears the dead body of the albatross. So like the cross is a reminder of the Christ sacrifice, this is why Christians wear it, so that all the time they remember the sacrifice that Christ made for them, for mankind. So the sailors, in the same manner, with the same idea, they hang the dead body of the albatross round his neck, so that it will also serve as a reminder to his sin, so that he should never forget that he committed that grave sin. So with this we come to the end of part 2. So you see how everything around them turns cruel, how the natural world begins to take its revenge, how all objects of nature become cruel to them, from water to sun to the sky to the breeze to objects or to the other living creatures of nature. They all begin to appear unfriendly towards them. So this is one form of punishment against the sailors, especially the ancient mariner. In part 3 we shall see the same theme being continued. We will see the same themes, in fact. All those themes are carried forward, but Coleridge is going to become more graphic, more pictorial. He will bring in more strange images, more horrifying images for you. So it's not over. The punishment is not over as yet. You will see in this part also, you will see that it becomes worse, in fact. So the punishment is going to go from bad to worse now. So more supernatural imagery will be introduced to you. You will see that the both worlds, they continue to punish the mariner and his shipmates. But the important phenomenon of this part is the appearance of a ghost ship. So the supernatural world now. The supernatural world alone is going to take over now, and it is now going to teach its lesson to them. So this ghost ship appears. The ghost ship, the appearance itself will show to you that it is not part of the natural world. It does not come to them aided by the natural world, by wind or by the waves. The ship does not move because of wind or waves, water waves, but it is moving on its own. So more horror he is going to create for you. So the inhabitants also on the ships are not human beings. They are the dead spirits of the dead. And the two inhabitants would be, one is death and the other is life in death. I'm introducing them to you now at the beginning, but I will explain later on in detail. But I want you to know at this stage what are the important things that we will look at in this part. So the ship appearance, and then these inhabitants of the ship. There are two people on ship. One is death. The name of one spirit is death. The other spirit is called life in death. And these two spirits, they are, like I told you, sailors are superstitious people. So these are allegorical figures. They are mythical figures for sailors around the world. But here you will see that they become real for the mariner. How? That we shall see now. So part 3 commences. There passed a weary time. Each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, a weary time. 3 times Coleridge uses this phrase, and I have highlighted it for you. A weary time. So the time was not passing for them, and it was weary, very tiring, very difficult. And each throat was parched. The thirst is emphasized. They are thirsty now. They have no water to drink, and glazed each eye. So they are now as if there is no life in their eyes. Their eyes are glazed. No change. How glazed each weary eye. Again, you see the same 2 words are repeated, glaze and weary. How glazed each weary eye. The eyes have the glazed look. They are now half dead because of thirst, and they have even lost the hope of life. So the eyes have a glazed look about them. They are looking without seeing. When looking westward, I beheld something in the sky. Now change occurs. All of a sudden, there is a sign of hope. He says the mariner was looking one day towards the west, and he saw a something in the sky. Because this thing was very far away, it appeared to be in the sky. But as you shall see from the lines that occur from here onwards, the theme of imprisonment will be introduced once again. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it seemed a mist. It moved and took at last a certain shape I wist. I wist means I became aware of. So because it was far away, it was a little speck, small dot, and then he says it became a mist. And then as it moved closer and closer, it seemed to have a certain shape. A speck, a mist, a shape I wist, and still it neared and neared, as if it dodged a water sprite. It plunged and tacked and veered. So it was a speck, then it grew into a mist, then it grew into a shape. He says, as I understood it, as I saw it, as I became aware of it, and still it neared, and it came nearer and nearer to our ship, but then he says, but it was moving in a strange manner. It was not coming straight at them. He says it was coming as if it was dodging a water sprite. A water sprite is a spirit, a water spirit. So he says as if it was dodging a water spirit, as if it was being followed by some spirit. So it was not coming straight at them. It was going in a mazy fashion, going in a zigzag manner. It plunged, meaning sometimes it moved forward quickly, sometimes it tacked, and then it stopped suddenly, and then veered, then it changed its direction and moved in a separate direction. So it was moving in a strange manner. So it went in one direction too quickly, stopped, then changed. And so it was moving in a zigzag manner. With throats unslacked, with black lips baked. So such is their condition. Their throats are unslacked, dry, completely dry. With lips have now turned black, and they are baked because of the heat. We could nor laugh nor wail, because even laughing or wailing would hurt them, hurt their lips, because they were now baked. Through utter draught, the dumb, all dumb we stood. And he says, because utter draught, through utter thirst, he says, we looked at this scene through as if we were dumb. Naturally, they were shocked also. They were so surprised. They didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. So they stand there as if they are all dumb. They can't speak. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood and cried, "A sail, a sail." But now the mariner becomes excited. He thinks that something is coming for the help. A ship is coming towards them to help them, to rescue them. So he takes the initiative. He bites. You see how ugly Coleridge is making it all turn. He actually bites his arm. He sucks the blood in so that his mouth, which was dry, becomes wet. And he cries, "A sail, meaning a ship, a ship." With throats unslacked, with black lips baked, agape they heard me call. Grey mercy, they for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in. So grey mercy means thank heavens. This is how the mariner is feeling. Remember, the mariner is telling his story. He had been shaken badly inside by the looks that they gave him, because he knew that he was not just his criminal, he was their criminal also. He had also harmed them, not just harmed himself. So he says, thank heavens, I now saw the grin on their faces. They grinned, and all at once they drew the breath in. They become full of life, and they were drinking all. It simply means that their hopes had returned. See, see, I cried, she tacks no more. Hitherto we work us wheel, without a breeze, without a tide. She steadies with upright keel. Now, when the ship is near, they understand that it is a strange phenomenon. Because she says, the mariner says, she tacks no more. She's not stopping. Tacking is pulling the line, pulling the rope of the sails to stop it, or to steer it in a certain direction. He says, it is not going in any other direction. She's not tacking. She's tacking no more. She's not changing direction anymore, but she's coming towards us. But how is it coming towards them? Without a breeze, without a tide. So this is a supernatural phenomenon. The ship is moving on its own, without the help from the natural world. She steadies with upright keel, and then when it is near their ship, she steadies itself, she stops itself with upright keel. So keel is at the bottom of the central line that runs through the ship. It steadies the ship, so it steadies itself, and it stops there. The western wave was all aflame. Now the ship has stopped near their ship. Coleridge takes time to describe the rest of the scene for you. So he says, the western wave was all aflame. The day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad bright sun. What is happening in the story? He says, the time now is evening time. The sun is setting in the west. It is setting in the west, and because it is setting, the sea, which is towards the west, it has all turned red. It is all burning red. It has turned into a flame. The day was well nigh done. The day has come to a close. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad, bright sun. And the sun was resting just above the west sea, and in any moment it will go down and it will be night. When that strange ship, now he admits it, the mariner is admitting it, he says, the strange ship drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun, and straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother send us grace. As if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. I'm sure you have realized by now that sun, but in fact all objects of nature, the sun, the moon, the breeze, the sky, they are all important for sailors. Sun is really important, source of life. It is the source of their being. So when something happens to the sun, it is taken as an ill omen by the sailors. And something happens here. The theme of imprisonment, as I mentioned before, is used again here, but this time the sun is imprisoned. The sun becomes a prisoner of this ghost ship. The sun is imprisoned behind the bars of the ghost ship. So this is what brings fear to their heart. It is as if life, because sun is a symbol of life, it is a source of life. The sun is imprisoned behind the bars. So life is imprisoned now. Life is imprisoned. So you see, they are afraid. Being superstitious, they are afraid, more frightened now. So what happens, he says, the ship has come and stopped near their ship, but it is now right between them and the sun. The sun is behind that ghost ship. Then there's this ghost ship, and then is their ship. So the sun, and here is the mariner's ship, in the middle comes and stops the ghost ship. And straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother send us grace. As if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. And the sun was now shining from behind these bars. If I can show it to you, but you can visualize it, because this, the ship was moving without sails. Only the poles, the masts are visible, and those masts act like bars, and behind those bars the sun is peeping from. So the ship looked like a skeleton in front of the setting sun, and the sun is imprisoned behind the bars. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears. Are those her sails that glance in the sun, like restless gossameres? Alas, you see, he's realizing that something is wrong. And he says, my heart began to beat loud. So ancient mariner tells the wedding guest, I felt something was wrong. Something was wrong. It was not help. It was something else. How fast she nears and came even closer to their ship. And as it came closer, he says, are those her sails? The sails, or the piece of cloth, he says, that he could see because the sun was right behind them. He says those sails appeared like restless gossameres. The sails moved about restlessly like spider webs. They were as thin as spider webs. Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And now he sees something. He sees the inhabitants of the ship, and they are also, because they are spirits. This woman that he sees, she's naked, and she's a spirit. She is not human, because he says, are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? So the sun first was imprisoned by the bars of the ship. Now it is imprisoned behind the ribs of this woman. of this spirit. So she is transparent because she's not human like us. There's no body over her, there's no mass, there's no flesh over her skeleton. So she's all skeleton. You see how scary it is becoming? So she's a skeletal figure, and the sun can peep through her rib cage. So the sun is now a prisoner of her ribs. And is that woman all her crew? And then he says, is she the only woman on this ship? This woman who's a skeleton? Is that a death? And now this fear, what he was expecting, this he spells out. He says, she must be death. So now the ancient mariner understands that their death is near. Now the supernatural world or the spirit has come to take away their life. So she must be death. And are there two? But then he realizes that there is not one on the ship, there are two skeletal figures on the ship. Is death that woman's mate? And then he says, so this death, this figure that I see, is she the mate? Is she a friend of that other woman also? So these are the two women figures that he sees. One he instantly recognizes because he understands that their death is now come. Her lips were red, her looks were free. Now this is the description of the other woman, not death. So he says her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold. Although she was all skeletal, naked, but she has lips which were all red, as if she drinks blood. Her looks were free, meaning you couldn't guess where she was looking. Her locks, her hair, her hair were yellow as gold. Her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare, life and death was she. So the worst nightmare of the mariner comes true. Maybe they were expecting death. Maybe they were hoping for death because their life was worse than death. So death would have been welcome, would be welcomed by them at this stage. But his worst fear was, because he uses the word the nightmare, the worst nightmare of the sailors is to be visited by life in death. It is an imprisonment for lifetime. So when you've committed a sin and you get a sentence that you will be killed in return, you know that you have some time, then your life will be over, the misery is done away with. But when you know that your misery will never end, then this is even more cumbersome. So this is the second, what the second spirit is. She's life in death, who thicks man's blood with gore. He says, so the sailors are aware of this. Sailors know how it feels to be in grip of this woman. So they were really afraid of her. But this, I told you these are allegorical figures. So this life and death, she also represents temptation. She represents our desires, our worldly desires, our temptations. And she takes hold of those souls and spirits who are, whose souls are also corrupted by temptations and desire. And this punishment is left for these people whose souls are full of temptations and desire and of selfish desires. So they get this punishment. They don't get death as a punishment, but they get life in death, meaning their life is like death. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. The game is done, I won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. Now the ship is near them, and they see the naked hulk is this tattered and battered and ship, which is in a strange shape. When it came quite close to their ship, they saw that these two skeletal figures, they were casting dice. They were playing as if we play Ludo. They were casting dice. They were selecting which one of them will win over who. So they are deciding who will take the sailors and who will take the mariner. So you see the sailors are all at one side, The mariner alone is on the other side. So there are two spirits, the death and life in death. So there are two throwing dice, casting dice to decide which one of them will take who. The game is won, is done. This is life and death. So life and death happily says that I have won the soul of the mariner. So she takes the soul of the mariner and gives him life imprisonment, while the other, the death, she takes the souls, she is supposed to take the souls of the sailors and give them death. The sun's rim dips. Now with this scene, the sun now dips, goes on down the ocean, the stars rush out, and one stride comes the dark. At one stride comes the dark, with far heard whisper over the sea, off shot the spectre bark. Now more horror is coming your way. It was in the evening that they saw all this. All had become red because the sun was setting, the fire, the waves were aflame, the sky had turned red, this woman had red lips. Strange light, in strange light they saw them deciding which one to take who. And now the sun sets, the night comes, it is night time now, the stars are out, and with far heard whisper over the sea, off shot the spectre bark. And what happens? With a whisper, with a sound, the spectre bark, the spectre ship, it moved, it shot off. We listened and looked sideways up. Now they are all scared. They're scared of what is going to happen. Fear at my heart as at a cup, my lifeblood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick the night. The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. They are afraid. They are afraid now because they see their death near. They know that they had heard the ship had moved away, that ghost ship had moved away, but they know that the spirits have not moved away. They are still there. So he personifies fear for you. He said that fear is like sipping my blood. Fear is drinking my blood. Fear is like a vampire sipping his blood, drinking his blood. And he says even the stars were dim, this night was dark, and it was thick. They could not see anything in that dark. But they were so frightened that their own faces shone white. He says the steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. And this white means, shows you how full of fear they were. From the sails the dew did drip. All is silent, so silent that even the dipping of the dew can be heard. The water that on the sail, it now drips softly, falls on the boards, dip, 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 till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star within the nether tip. So he says, the night was progressing, the horned moon, again this is supernatural. The moon is not like the natural moon now. It is a horned moon, it is a half moon. It is half moon, it is in the shape of a horn, and it's got a white star, bright star underneath. Nether tip means under it. One after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang and cursed me with his eye. Now, the death, the one spirit which was death, it starts its work. So one after one, all the sailors, they turn to face the ancient mariner. See the ghostly scene? All the sailors stand up. They face the ancient mariner, but not with a groan, neither with a sigh. They look at him with a ghastly pang. Pang is a deep sense of deep regret, deep pain. And they cursed me with their eyes. So they cursed with their eyes. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan, with heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. So that spirit death is taking away the souls of the sailors one by one. But he says that one by one these sailors dropped down, lifeless as a lump, as the soul was taken away from their bodies. But they went dead without a sigh or a groan. The souls did from their bodies fly, they fled to bliss or woe, and every soul that passed me by, like the whiz of my crossbow. And he says, as the souls flew from their bodies. Now this is a strange picture that Coleridge creates. The ancient mariner can see their souls flying out of their bodies. But he says, as they passed me, as each soul passed me, whether it was happy or sad, I don't know, but as it passed me with the sound of an arrow passing. Again, you see, this is the reminder of the sin that he had committed. He had killed a bird with an arrow. So the souls also passed him quickly like the whiz of an arrow. So, but they were going to some happy place or a sad place, or were they happy or sad, he doesn't know. But he is reminded of his sin now, because all his mates, all his shipmates, all his sailors are dead because of the sin that he had committed. So with this, we come to the end of part 3, and with this, we also come to the end of the working of one spirit, which is death, which takes away the souls of all the shipmates except the ancient mariner. In the next part, we shall see how the ancient mariner's punishment is still not over, and he will alone now undergo a severe kind of punishment from both the natural as well as the supernatural world. So I take leave now, and I shall meet you again in the next lecture. Thank you.